and get started. Okay. The agenda looks like it's really, really long, but it really isn't. I decided to just leave the information here so that the details about Bibliovation 6.0 and its release and its numbering is kept readily available for everyone. One thing that I do want to point out is that the dates that are left to schedule an upgrade are listed under D1. So between June 17th and 20th, the 24th and 27th, then in July, the 15th through the 18th, and the 22nd through the 25th. And if you drop down just a little bit more, you'll see that in point G, it says that the libraries that have already upgraded, Marymount Manhattan and Boston Conservatory of Music are both have upgraded recently to 5.20. And there are a few that have upgraded to Bibliovation 6.2, 6.0.2 rather. William James College, Duville College, and the Connecticut Historical Society. There is one scheduled for next week on June 17th. That is Warren Community College. And I know I didn't get the whole name there correct, but regardless, they are scheduled. As near as I can tell, the rest of you haven't scheduled your upgrade yet, and I do want to continue to encourage you to do that, because if you don't schedule it yourself, remember, LibLime will select a date between July 29th and August 1st. So look at your calendars, determine what date will work best for you. If you haven't already done so, sign into your sandbox and look at how the software looks. Make sure that you are aware of the major differences between the versions, and get ready for your upgrade. Remember, those dates are going to be left on this page so that you can see which dates are available. Even though it looks like there are still quite a few, they will go by quickly. The summers tend to do that. Okay, so the one thing that we were going to do this time was go through the serials module. And last week when we were going to meet, but I ran into a serials problem, I sent out a message telling everyone that they could in fact do a serials demo last week if they wanted to. And I just wanted to make sure that you all knew what I was talking about then. In the Support Center software, and I switched over to that very quickly here, there is a tab that's called Solutions. If you move to the Solutions tab, there will be all different kinds of things that you can find in here. For example, the release notes are here, different basically procedures and how to do things in LAK. The second item that is listed here is training videos for Bibliovation. And the support staff have been working on creating training videos for everyone. And they are all listed here. I haven't looked at all of them, but I have definitely looked at the new serials module one a couple of times. There are some new features in the software, and I've told you about them, but you probably haven't had whole lots of additional time to look at the documentation. Yeah, and Stephen, I know they haven't been updated, but they are a little bit better than nothing. So if you want to find out more information about any of these particular features, you can look here as well as in the documentation. If there's something that you see in here that isn't working the way that it looks like it's working in the current version that you're using, please ask about it. Ask me or enter a support center ticket, either one. But then following down the page, there is additional information on some of the different modules. The part that you can definitely skip is the migration from LLK. That is intended for the public libraries that co-sponsored the Code Fusion project. The serials module is 30 minutes long. As I've reviewed it, I know that there are a couple of things that have changed in there. For example, there is a bug that is described. This particular video, I believe, was created last fall. So there are some things that have not been there. Okay. So keep in mind that in the support center, there's more than just the that people have entered into the system. Okay, let me ask, did anybody have some time so that they could go in and look at the video that Jane did? Okay. Stephen, did you happen to look at it, or your serials people? Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm not going to play it for you. I will show you just the very bare bones of the module itself, and we'll let you know the little things that I've learned about it that can help you as you start looking at it. Before I move into the software itself, I want to point out the documentation. I have the user manual up here, and let's see, I can't remember the chapter number. Chapter 14 is the one about serials. And it does go through absolutely everything that is in the module. It goes into a little bit more detail than what I'm going to go into. So hopefully this will be useful to you all. It takes a little bit of time to work your way through it. But what I found is that you can jump into the software and only have to go back to the documentation when you absolutely get stuck and can't do anything. Okay, so as I open this, let's see, I did save this record, so I'm going to go back to my staff homepage. And we are going to be looking at the serials module. Now, I have modified my staff homepage, so you'll notice that I don't have serials listed here. So for me, I have to go to the More drop-down menu and click on serials to go into the serials module itself. That is not a problem for me. Actually, it'll probably be easier just to click on this. But that's where I had left it. Okay, so this is not what I expected to see. Okay, hold on just a minute. Okay, there had been a problem last week in the serials module, and I think what happened is that all of the serials that had been in here are now gone. There were some strange things that were happening, so LibLime offered to erase what was there so that I could start fresh. So that's where we are. So at this point in time, I will revise in my mind as I go along. Typically, when you come to this page, when you click on serials, you will see a list of all of the serials publication records that exist for you. Right here, right now, you see that I don't have any that are in here. So that means basically I have a blank slate. I can start from fresh and I can create a new publication. When I click on the new publication button in the sidebar, I get a form that I will then use to create my first publication record. Now, when you are working with the serials module, just like in previous versions, there must be a catalog record for any serial title that you're going to add into your serials module. So there are a few that I have, I know for certain that I have in the database. So I'm going to use those titles. I'm going to start and search first for National Geographic Traveler. Now, what this is going to do when I do the search at this point, it's going to search in my serials list. And that really was an unnecessary step at this point because I don't have any publications here. So I'm going to click on my new publication again, and I'm going to search the bibliographic database to see if I can find a bibliographic record that goes by. And you'll notice that the very first title that I see there is National Geographic Traveler. So the system is going to link that bib record to this particular publication. There is no publication ID number in this record. There won't be one until I save the record. So we will go forward with that. The next field here, this auto create issues, you should always leave checked. There is a cron job that runs under the system every night that will look for this auto create issues, and it will then automatically create issues that you are about to receive. Okay, and the next issue will be updated once the record is saved. And when it says once the record is saved, we need to save the whole publication record. If I were to save it at this time, I would have an entry for this title, but I wouldn't have any information about the particular serial. The new publication form has a couple of different sections. The first section is just general information about the title. The information in this section will be filled in once we add in information in our chronology and enumeration. So the chronology and enumeration, let me X this down here, consists of 3 different sections. The first one, the schedule, chronology, and enumeration section, allows you to identify a pattern, a prediction pattern that you'll use for this title. It allows you to set the beginning and ending dates for your subscription, and a few other things that we'll go over. The enumeration counters is an area that you don't need to use very often. This is the one for those truly irregular serials that come in and you need to fuss around with different prediction patterns and different ways of identifying it. Typically, what you're going to find is that everything that you need for traditional, regular patterns are going to be covered in this schedule, chronology, and enumeration section. The third section is the one where you can see if the pattern that you've selected does actually predict the serial issues that will be received, and if you detect any issues, it doesn't increment correctly or something is not quite right, you can go back and edit your schedule so that you can get the information in correctly. So let me go ahead and open this. This error message that you see right here, this one is the ongoing message that that I have reported to LibLime, and I don't understand what it is for, but I know if I don't have a chronology, a schedule in here, it's going to be problematic, and I won't be able to add I won't be able to create a prediction for this particular journal. Normally, you will not see this. When I go into a different database, like the Bibliovation database that's out there as a test database, I don't see this. So this is something unique to my sandbox. I don't know if you will see it in yours. So just try to ignore it for right now. In order to get started, you see it too, Stephen? Okay. So to get started with our schedule, we'll click on the Add button. The Add button will pop up a window that gives you the capability to identify a template that you're going to use. Okay, there are several patterns that are predefined, and if the arrival pattern on your particular title matches any of these, you can certainly select one of these. It does work very nicely by selecting one of these. I have created a monthly and bi-monthly issues so far. I'm going to, for our title, the National Geographic Traveler, which comes out 6 times a year. It's a bi-monthly. I'm going to choose the bi-monthly that says January, March. That's every 2 months on the 1st of the month. This one actually matches better the bi-monthly February through April for its actual publishing pattern, but you'll notice that these words invalid pattern show up here. And as I've been working through this, I've been trying to use both of these patterns, and every time I do the invalid pattern, it doesn't work. So I would recommend staying away from any of the patterns that say invalid pattern. There are a couple of them that I've seen. So I'm going to go with
do you know why there is only a quarterly that's an invalid pattern? Because
actually,
in the manual, I'm seeing a quarterly that's fine, but I tried to set up a quarterly, and all I found is the invalid pattern, and it's not working.
and I don't know why. I'll report that one and tell them that that has to work. I would guess that it has something to do with the dates that they have selected. Quarterlies can be, well, they can be seasonal. They can be, they can be identified different ways.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why this one is marked invalid. I was very surprised when I saw the bi-monthly one that was marked invalid, but I determined very quickly that it didn't work.
Yeah, so it'd probably be good if they were to just take those out and put invalid patterns.
I would agree with that, definitely. I suspect they haven't had a whole lot of comments on the serials module. The first time that I worked with this a while back, I was working strictly on subscription records and issue records. So I didn't run into this until I started working with creating new titles. And when I do my testing, I do the simplest ones,
Yeah.
not surprisingly. And so until I ran into this one with the bi-monthly one, I wasn't quite understanding. I suspect that there are quite a few things about the patterns that are going to change as people start using them more. I don't have any idea if the public libraries, South Central in particular, has done a lot of testing in the serials module. I know that they use it and that it is something that has to work for them. But since their migration to Bibliovation is not scheduled until either the end of this year or sometime next year, in other words, I haven't decided when yet. I think that I think they've been focusing primarily on circulation until this point.
Okay.
So, but that is something that I will let them know. I've been talking with Mary, probably every day or every other day for a while now about this. So we'll get them figured out. I know that we should be able to do the bi-monthly, but it doesn't seem to work this way. So the bi-monthly, January, March, whatever, this one I know does work because I've actually got it to work. Okay, let me continue. There are a couple of things that are introduced in the serials module that we haven't seen in the software before, and that's this question mark. The first one is this question mark. This will actually pop up some help information. This information does appear in the user manual, and I would argue that it's easier to use in the user manual than the pop-up. But if you're working on something and you don't want to pull up the manual because that takes time too, you can look at this. I have discovered that I cannot move this. I would like to be able to move it so that I could see the form below. But essentially, there's two sections of help information here. That section that begins with the every section that identifies part of the help. The on section identifies the rest of the help information. And I'm going to close this now. And you'll see that with my every, I'm going to click that plus sign. When you see it, when you see this form the first time in your system, you will see the every years, month, weeks, and days. You'll see all four of those. And that just led me to wonder what's going on here because I had to open these. They should have been open. If you have a pattern that uses year, month, week, and day, in other words, if you have a newspaper that you're going to create a pattern for, you would want to use all of these elements in your pattern. If you don't want to use all of the elements in your pattern, you can click on that X that appears in the box to take away the days, and then if you don't want to identify the week, you can click on that. Okay, so our repeats, this tells me that I'm going to increment my pattern every 2 months. If I had an annual and I were going to repeat it every year, I would get rid of my month and just use every 1 year. But in this case, since I'm dealing with a bi-monthly, I will want to receive 6 issues a year, which will be once every other month. Okay, In the next part, this on part, this is going to tell the system when you're going to receive it. If you are receiving it on a specific week of the month, you would identify in this box a number 1 through 4 so that you would know which week was coming in. In this case, what I have done in the past and what I'll do now is say I'm going to receive this on the 15th day of the month, so that that gives me a little bit of leeway from the 1st until the 15th. The next part that we have here is the during. This is your subscription term beginning with the first month that you receive it through the last month that you receive it in a year. So this right now says from 01/01, so from January 1st through December 31st, I'm going to receive the issues. Okay, the name of the pattern is bi-monthly. And once we have this part of it set up, then we can go on to identify the chronology. In the chronology, you identify the month, the year, the day, whatever time period you have working with it. And again, we have our pop-up that gives us our chronology information. I'm not going to go through and try and explain all of this. Basically, in order to add in something that is, if you're creating your own pattern, you would want to use the abbreviations and the information that you find in here to create your specific pattern. Okay, so chronology is month and year, or you can enter something different down here. This is set up the way that it's supposed to be, so we don't need to do anything more with the chronology. With the enumeration, this would be volume 10, number 3, and then any other designation that would be on the particular journal. In this case, this particular journal has a month, a day, which would be our chronology. I'm sorry, it has a year and a month. It also has an issue number, and it's called number 147, for example. So in this case, we have several different choices to choose from, and the one that we'll choose for this one is number X. So that's going to identify our pattern with the words number and then whatever the dollar, whatever the number is that we will put into this. Okay, we have different options for our increment. We can either normally increment it, which is what you would do for the first time you set up your pattern. If you have a supplement, an index, a double issue, whatever, you can set those up. I'm not going to deal with those right now. We'll get to those later. Okay, once we have our enumeration, our chronology and enumeration set up, we can save it. Okay, and I've got several different windows here that I'm trying to look at. If we had any other peculiarities, for example, if this were a monthly with the summer months combined into an issue, we could split up our chronology and enumeration so that we could describe each part of the year. If we had a publication that was every month, January through May, and then June and July, and August and September were 2 different combined issues, we would have our January through May followed by our 2 combined issues, and then going back, which would be by monthly patterns, then we would go back to our monthly pattern for the rest of the year. So it takes a little bit of investigating in order to get that there. for this particular journal, this is pretty much all that we need to fill in this first part for the date range. Our next issue is identified as June 13th, 2019. The chronology would be June 2019, number 1. Now, depending on what we have for our issue number, in this particular case, we would want to make sure, since we don't want to start trying to get to the right page here. Okay, so our number isn't going to start with number 1 because we're starting within the issue itself. So we're going to enter in here 148, which would be the issue number of the June 2019 title. Okay, I'm going to save, and it tells me that June 2019 is our next one. I'm going to open up my chronology and enumeration one more time and come down to the predictions. And based on the information that I entered into the schedule, it will tell me what the next issues are that I will expect. So after I receive June, it will tell me that I'll receive August. You'll notice too in the dates, it gives me the 15th, which I put in the pattern, saying that that's the date that it's published, the date that I will get it. And in the enumeration, it has my number 148, 149, all the way continuing down. I'm not certain how, I've seen some predictions that go on for like 2 or 3 years, so I'm not certain what the rule is for these. This one I notice is pretty short. Okay, so that's getting the chronology and enumeration set up for our title. There are 2 other parts that we need to deal with within the serials module. One is the subscriptions, and the second is in the specific issues. In the subscriptions, for most of you, you will probably have just one branch that is receiving subscriptions, but there are some of you that do have multiple branches on your campus. So one of the first things that we need to do is first figure out which subscriptions are going to exist. When you click on the ad, it's going to give you a pop-up saying that we have, a new subscription ID. You can name it. You can either put a branch name in here, or you can repeat the name of the publication itself. I'm just going to enter an abbreviation so I know it's National Geographic Traveler, and then select the branch from the drop-down. If you are linking your serials check-ins with your acquisitions, if you use both serials and acquisitions, you can, in this this next field, identify the vendor account from your acquisitions. If you are not using acquisitions, but you still want to identify a vendor, you can do that. And then see, if we look here, this is pulling in everything from acquisitions. But if I didn't have acquisitions, I would be able to identify a vendor by using the vendor link in the sidebar. And that would then populate this, which would make claiming possible. Okay. The next elements that are in our subscription record is our subscription start date. And it depends on what your actual start date is. I'm going to just use January 1st, and December 31st. So a calendar year would be what's pretty typical for a subscription. Now, if you want to have a staff note or an OPAC note appear on every issue that you check in, you would enter them here. I'm not going to put in a staff note, but if you enter anything in here in your OPAC note, you will see this display in the holdings information on the subscription tab. So I'm going to put keep 2 years and just leave it at that. So we'll keep for 2 years, then toss after that. Okay, late after days is the piece that triggers cron, or that tells the cron job when to identify an expected issue as late. So in this case, you can choose any value that you want to put in here. I'm going to enter 7. I could enter any amount that I wanted to. This is going to help you when you're trying to identify which issues need to be claimed. Now, one thing that we were not able to do in LAK was to create item records upon receiving an issue of a periodical, but we can here. If you want to create items, in other words, you want the periodical issues to be able to be checked out in circulation, you can put a check mark in this box, and you then can define what is going to go into your item records. Okay, so what's going to pop up here is a list of all of the different fields that are available in your item record. So you can identify permanent location, and if you want to, you can identify a default value for that. If we want to add another field, all we have to do is click inside this box and maybe choose a collection code, and we'll call it periodical. We may want to identify a call number, and in the call number, if you classify your journals, you would put in either the LC or Dewey number. But if you just have a collection that you call periodicals or serials or whatever, that's what you would enter in this field. So I'm just going to, for instance, put in a serials. And you can identify as many fields as you want to add into the item record. You can always add a barcode to the item record upon check-in, or at the point of circulating, or at the point of an item circulating. So that's how you can create your item record. I'm going to leave this checked, and we'll see how it works on check-in. If you are using acquisitions and you want to add each issue to an acquisitions purchase order, you can click on this one. I'm not going to click on this one right now. The last portion of our subscription record is a routing list. So if you want to create routing lists, you simply click in the field that's underneath and start typing in a name, and it will search the patron file. You'll be able to select patrons. If you want to add more people to your routing list, it will stay in about the same area. So we can add that person, we can add another person, and if we wanted to, we could keep adding. You can rearrange the list, so you can just grab onto it and put it into the right place. And you can then at the very end of this, add a routing list note. So you might want to say pass to next person when finished, return to serials department. And then when you do check something in and there's a routing list, you will be able to print the routing list itself. Okay, so now we have a subscription record. Now we need to identify some issues, and the issues are going to be pretty, it's one of the simplest pieces. You simply click on New, and it's going to expect that our first issue is June 2019, number 148, because that's how we set it up initially. We can create a couple of additional new issues, and at this point, we're then ready to check in issues. Now, there are multiple places where you can check in, where you can begin the check-in. Let me go back up here to Serials Home. Okay, well, let me search for this one. Since I didn't have my list of publications here, I wasn't able to show you what I was expecting to see. But now that I have my title in my publication search results, I can initiate a receive from this particular page. So if you have someone who is checking in new issues, they should be able to work from the publication, from the serials home, and just search through the serials list and receive the items. Okay, June 2019 is the one that we're expecting. In order to check it in, you simply identify the date that you received it, and we'll click on Receive. Here's where our print routing slip would come up. And this is one of those times where you need to allow pop-ups for this. It's one of the few times that a pop-up actually comes in here. Okay, now that isn't what I expected to see. I'm not sure why that did that, but that is not what I expected to see. I expected it to see the list itself. I'll have to try that again later and see what's going on with that. Let me go back to my publication record, and when we come and look at our summary here again, you'll see that our issues, we have our June 19, there was one expected, and it did not update my, okay, it was working pretty well until here. I
don't think you clicked the receive button.
I did click it. Let me try again.
So you don't have to put a check mark in the box and...
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to do that.
Okay.
Oh, and here is the item record. So at this point, if there's anything else I wanted to add into the item record, I could do that. I'm just going to save a really brief record. And if I wanted to, I clicked here to print the routing list. If I want to print the routing list, I could either look at the routing list itself, or if I clicked on the printer, it would then print the list. So you can see it pulls up my printer. I'll go ahead and print it. Thank you, Stephen. I forgot that. Okay, so that's basically how the serials module works from creating a new, and I showed you creating a new serial publication and with the enumeration chronology and also with the subscription record and the issues. Let me go back over here again because now it should show me what I was going to show. Okay, now when I come down here and look at the June 2019, it tells me that I've received one of one. So I have one subscription record, and that one subscription record was received. Now, after I've received the October issue, what will happen is that the cron job will be running on a regular basis, and it will predict the next issue that will come after the October. So I'm not going to have to go in and do these new, I'm not going to have to open up everything manually. But if I do have a supplement or an index or something that has additionally come for this particular title, I can create a new special, and that would allow me to indicate whether or not this was a supplement, if it was an annual, like Consumer Reports always has an annual issue. And you don't usually try to get those entered into the pattern itself, you just check them in as they come. Okay, any questions? Does this make sense?
So our staff, unbeknownst to me previously, since I didn't really have to have anything to do with serials, had been using the notes field in the I guess it's 5.18 that we're on, to indicate when an issue is out for routing. And they've determined that they can use the status here instead, although it's somewhat cumbersome to get to it. But I think it was just as cumbersome to get to the notes field before.
Mm-hmm.
So they can use the status and set it to unavailable, which is reasonably clear when you look in the OPAC, although obviously not as clear as if it were to say routing or generally allow us to create a variety of statuses that match our needs in the authorized values.
Mm-hmm. My typing is horrible today. Well, I know the National Geographic Traveler bibliographic record is there. I'm not sure why it's not showing up for me right now. I was going to try and show you what the display looked like based on what I had entered into the record, but I guess since I don't see it here, I'll have to wait until it's indexed. This is a basic run through of where haven't looked at any of the the more difficult patterns with you, and I haven't shown all of the little tricks that you can do within the module. Is this enough for you? If you're not using serials, do you get a sense of what it is like to use it? And if you are using serials, are there other questions that you have that you would like to have answered? Okay, so Stephen, I'll follow up with LibLime on the invalid pattern message that we're getting on those and find out why they're there and how to make them valid.
Great, yeah. Eventually, it's possible that we'll want to add a quarterly.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks.
Definitely. I'm hoping that this is just because there hasn't been as much testing on serials as there has been on circulation. Okay, let me go back over here. The last thing that I want to tell you about is the fact that the patron load enhancement that we had talked about a few months ago has been ordered. Basically, what this is going to do is to allow let me get, okay, it's going to automate the patron import file process by allowing libraries to place properly formatted CSV files from the registrar's office onto a server within the organization's network structure, either a web server or an FTP server. Bibliovation will then be given credentials to fetch the file for automatic import into Bibliovation. And the original files won't be deleted or managed by Bibliovation, but Bibliovation will track the files by name and will only ingest files that have not been processed before. This is to work with the initially, it is intended for the banner system, for the banner registrar system, and it is intended to allow the new patron loads to occur without human handling, as it were. This has been ordered. Patrick has told me that they expect that this will be done by the end of July. And I'm sure that as we get closer to that date, he'll be wanting to have people interested in using it to let him know so that he can arrange for testing for them. So we will we'll be meeting a few times before the end of July. So as I hear more information about this particular enhancement, that is something that will be done. Or that's something I'll need to get people to test with. Obviously, St. John's will be one of the libraries that it will be testing. We suspect that probably Hartford would want to be in on it as well. And if any of the rest of you use Banner as your registrar system, we certainly will be interested in testing with you as well. Okay, so that's all that I have today. Any other questions or comments? One last go at getting your upgrade scheduled. Please do so. I'll keep bringing it up each time we meet, and I am encouraging you to do so because I did learn from Patrick this week that they will be putting out Bibliovation, or they are already working on Bibliovation 6.2. And once that comes out, as per our agreement with LibLine, their support is for the current version and one back. So once we reach that point where they release 6.2, that means that everyone will need to be up on 6.0. So we will meet again in 2 weeks.
Can I ask, does this system work with receipt printers? And does anybody have a recommendation for one if it does?
It does work with receipt printers. I think spine labels. Let me see if I can. Yes, it does work with receipt printers. This one right here, the Star TSP 600, is the one that I've seen listed here before. Stephen,
apparently it is possible to get it to work.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And
great.
I know that South Central had receipt printer templates that were created specifically for them that worked within the software. And I am not certain what they use, but enter a support center ticket asking that question about what receipt printer is recommended.
Okay, great. All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you all. Talk with you again in 2 weeks.